Hi folks, you're with us today, Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about immigration scams and how broad and widespread and brazen a lot of these immigration scams are. They involve local Western players and white people and also recent immigrants, and also labour hire, labour front scams, and internationally funded NGO lawyers and various immigration facilitators, and of course legal aid officials that are funded by Western tax dollars. So what are these scams? Well, let's say someone arrives illegally from I don't know, wherever, Pakistan or wherever, it doesn't matter, some third world country, so some African basket case country. Then they've got no right to be in there. They're not refugees. They're not running or escaping from anything. They're just freeloaders, but they're not white. And the globalist immigration scams to put as many non-white third world people into the white Western world, or hitherto white Western world, as they can. So really anything goes. It's an ideological crusade, and anything goes. Anything is permissible. Any perjury, any lie, any forged document, any falsification, conspiracy to commit perjury, it is all acceptable in aid of the ideological agenda. So it ceases to be criminal because the ideology overrides the law and facts and so on. This is something that happens in, say, the divorce courts, for example, and we're seeing it creeping into other courts now. This ideological law trumping actual law. But coming back to the this immigration thing, so somebody arrives from somewhere in Africa. They're an illiterate peasant. They're illiterate in their own language, let alone anything else. They've been moved from Africa. They've been incited and stirred up and agitated to move from Africa by globalist agitators, paid agitators. They've been transported from where they were in Africa to Europe by the globalist transport, logistical machine of buses, coaches, ships, all sorts of things, working in concert with people smugglers, you name it. So they move, and so they arrive in let's say Britain. Now they're not fleeing anything. They're just freeloaders looking for an easy run, lots of handout. That's all. They're freeloaders. But again, they qualify ideologically because they're not white. So there's a vast array, an apparatus, an infrastructure to help them. That's helped them get to Britain, but it's also going to help them stay because they've got no legal standing to stay. They're not refugees. They're certainly not legal migrants. They've arrived illegally and they have no reason or basis, legal standing to stay by any legal means. So the legal backstory is invented, and there are numerous people to help that. So we'll help you. So you need to say that you're homosexual Christian and you're escaping persecution, and we'll fix it so that there's a refugee camp nearby. We'll fix it. So we'll say you were at that refugee camp and you reported that you were fleeing persecution, and we'll say that there were gangs of goons running around trying to find you and kill you, so you can't possibly go back to the country. So we'll create all this elaborate backstory that your story is true, and this is what you need to say. This is how you fill out the form. We'll fill it out for you. We'll get your case to court free of charge. We'll pay for everything, and we'll put that to the judge. Well, what about the judge won't believe? What if the judge wants evidence? Doesn't matter. This judge is a tame judge, and he always produces verdicts that we're happy with. If they do try and deport you, we'll have lawyers on it straight away, and we'll have we'll be able to appeal it to a higher court. If you lose, they'll be able to appeal it to the next court. And so, and by the way, we'll fix you up with all sorts of underground economy work and things like that. So there's this wide network of support now. You've got to sort of look at this. There's forged documents. There's suborning perjury, which means you're encouraging someone to commit perjury and facilitating that perjury. There's the conspiracy to commit perjury with NGOs and various other United Nations operatives. There's the legal aid, who all know that it's a fabricated story, but they don't care. The entire infrastructure knows that the whole thing is fabricated. They know that this guy is a freeloader. They know that there's no, he's not escaping any. So they create this elaborate backstory, creating multiple witnesses, multiple levels of enablement and conspiracy to do this, knowing that they're breaking the law, by the way, knowing that they're committing perjury, knowing that there's conspiracy to commit perjury. But do they see that it's that? Well, no, not really, because they're pursuing, see, the law is actually a white fascist Nazi white supremacist law. The law that says when you say you're escaping persecution, you actually have to be escaping persecution. That's just a mere detail. It's irrelevant. Nazis do that. Hitler does that. So the reality is that if they commit perjury, break the law, do all that sort of stuff, then they're actually doing something good, because they're fighting back against Nazis. So they're actually doing something good. They're doing good, and they are good people doing good. So that's, now this is a view that has crept into many areas of law. But when you look, I'm surprised that when some of these scams get uncovered, that the government seems surprisingly reluctant to prosecute. That they seem to not really care. I mean, if there's some super egregious things where there's bribes and corruption going on a large scale, maybe then they'll consider it. But if the person is doing it ideologically and selflessly, and as much as they're not necessarily taking bribes to do it, or some do, plenty do, then but even the bribes, it seems they don't care about that. If the bribes are too huge, they might. And I've noticed when people do get caught doing it, and invariably they have African or Arabic names, that sort of thing. But if they do get caught, they get these surprisingly light sentences. 3 months of weekend detention and a small fine, this sort of thing. They're typically the lawyers that help them are the same lawyers that work on behalf of the NGOs and immigration. So the globalist machine is helping them, supporting them with free legal support and all this thing. Whereas I can't get free legal support if I've got a case. So why should this person, when they've brazenly and egregiously broken the law? But to these people, it's not law breaking, because they're doing ideological good. And if you're doing ideological good, how can it also be law breaking? I mean, hey. But didn't Hitler think he was doing ideological good by getting rid of the Jews? No, that's different. That's different. That's that Nazis aren't allowed to do it. But we can do the same thing as Hitler did. But we're good people, so we're allowed to do it. So now, I remember we did a sort of a stint of a section of sort of legal studies, I guess you'd call it. At high school originally. This was, I think, year 11 maybe, and it was more like an intro course to jurisprudence, I guess. It wasn't for lawyers in training, I guess, but it would have been helpful for that. And it was what was drilled into us at the time was that perjury, and particularly conspiracy to commit perjury, was a serious thing. Even if it was done accidentally or done with good intentions or misguided intentions, it was still viewed as highly illegal and very serious. And one that I mentioned many times before, or a number of times before, is a guy was he was in the witness stand claiming that he saw a car drive over a child, knock down a child. In fact, he didn't. The child was already on the road, knocked down by a previous vehicle, and this vehicle drove over the child, and not touching the child. And as this witness came around the corner, saw that, and therefore gave evidence in court that in fact that car had knocked down the child. And this was proved by the lawyer. That in fact that person hadn't seen it before. It may appear that way as they came around the corner, But the reality was they only saw the car driving over. The child was already not knocking the child down. And that guy was, the judge threatened that guy with, you have committed perjury in this court. I will consider that it is very possible you will go to prison for committing perjury. That's how serious it was. It was considered very, very serious. Now that guy was really saying all he saw, and okay, the mind played tricks on him, or his eyes played tricks, and he misinterpreted a car driving over being equivalent to not. Okay, but his intention was not malicious or evil, but through that carelessness and lack of scrupulous attention to detail, he could have given evidence that may have resulted in an innocent man going to prison, and this was viewed very, very seriously by the court. And I remember reading newspapers, as a senior high school kid, college, and as a young man, everything, about people who'd committed perjury or conspired to commit perjury and how they go into prison. Now, some of these prison sentences, I think most places, jurisdictions had, I don't know if it's still today, but had the penalties of 10 to 15 years for committing perjury. Now, the judge would typically recommend a perjury charge that would then go to the Department of Justice or Department of Prosecutions. They would then decide whether to run with it or not, and then that would be prosecuted through the courts with the state prosecuted. But for some reason, they're not, because of the globalisation project, they're just not interested in that anymore. So if you commit the most heinous crimes, but in aid of or in support of the globalisation project, then really you're not committing a crime, because ideologically you're doing what the globalists want you to do, whether that's BLM burning buildings down, it doesn't matter. If you're ideologically doing what they want, then it's not criminal, as they would see it. But it shows how easily the law and the rule of law and due legal prose, how easily it can be subverted. I mean, just taking your eye off the ball is enough. And that's what's happened, certainly in the immigration side. They're just not interested in prosecuting it. So effectively, they're protecting and enabling what is a monstrous racket of international illegal immigration. That's what they're doing. And all Western governments, I believe, are complicit in this. So now, where did it begin legally? Well, it began in the divorce courts. Now, this is where the social worker and the legal aid lawyer representing the children and the lawyer representing the mother, all this sort of thing, they would get together and openly, the psychologist evaluating the family, and they would openly conspire to commit perjury in court. And they would brazenly put in false documents, forged documents, would brazenly do reports that misrepresented and misquoted somebody, and they would claim to have conducted interviews they hadn't. And I mean, the level of perjury was quite stunning. But I don't know of any person who was prosecuted, no matter how brazen their perjury, as in representing the ideology. If there were plenty of men that were, fathers that were done for committing perjury because they hadn't fully declared all their assets, or they'd underdeclared them, or that was treated very, very seriously. But anything else, like the lawyer representing the mother could just casually send an email to the social worker or something like that and say, look, do you mind saying, just saying that can you just say that the father's a wife beating, child abusing, rotten, no good son, so okay, do you mind? Yeah, not a problem. Yeah. And this was how casual and brazen the perjury was in the divorce courts, but nobody was prosecuted for it. Now, every now and again, you'd get a guy who was cashed up enough and maybe savvy enough and prepared to fight the fight that would go after some of these people. And there was some mention in the media, about those, but it wasn't treated as serious. It's some asshole troublemaker, straight white guy, decided to make trouble for all these good ideological people. So if they committed a perjury, who cares? It was in an ideological good cause because they're fighting Nazis. I mean, hey, what's wrong with that? And now there's Nazis complaining because they told lies about him and forged documents and fabricated this and perjuried that, and he's complaining about it. I mean, what an asshole. So some guys would go after it, but in every case, certainly that I could find, none of these people were prosecuted. Maybe they were fired, that sort of thing. But they even that wasn't real. They were fired from direct government employ, and then went to work for a labour hire firm, and then re-employed through the labour hire firm. So that they didn't suffer at all. And the reason they didn't suffer, the reason they weren't held accountable, or why no one cared about it, is they were supporting the ideological cause. And in support of that, anything goes. And that's really, I think, where we're at now. This has crept into many other courts now, child protection courts, rape courts, and wherever you see these specialist petite courts being set up, to fight a particular hate crime, what they're really saying is this is an ideological court where any amount of perjury in support of the ideology is accepted. And, if you're a straight white male, whether it be January 6th committee or anything like that in the US, if you're a straight white male, then and you get dragged in front of these courts, you're fucked, unless you've got serious money and you can fight them and escalate it to higher courts and keep on going. Only then. But and not many people have those sort of resources. So really, anyone they target is in deep shit. The best you can hope for, if you're legally savvy and say you want to represent yourself, the best you can hope for is maybe having a draw. But that's it. So this is the extent now. No government, Western government, is interested in doing anything about this, as in stopping it and returning us to a standard of the rule of law and due legal process and the rules of evidence, all this sort of thing. No one's interested. No government is interested. And you struggle to find any politician who's interested. And if they say they're interested, you'd struggle to find anyone who's prepared to do anything about it. So these standards, in order to allow the globalist ideological project to be put in place, the rule of law and due legal process have to be done away with. It's just inconvenient. It just gets in the way. And anyone who supports the ideology, the globalist project, is in their view doing a service, no matter how many lies they tell, no matter how much forgery, no matter how much perjury and conspiracy to commit perjury. It's all acceptable in the interests of the globalist project. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.